Welcome to another Light for the Journey, and my co-host, you're a co-host, how you like that?
I do like that.
Yeah, my
Sounds
co-host, Trent Deaver, and I'm glad that you actually have come on board to help me with these.
Oh, yeah,
I think you
not a
bring some
problem.
neat perspective on things. Where Light for the Journey, where we take a look at some of the things that go on in life and view it, eventually we'll hopefully get there and view it from the perspective of Scripture, or in light of Scripture, and how do we as believers deal with all this stuff. And having said that, I'm Pastor Carl Tenney, and I pastor the Oak Hills Wesleyan Church, and you now come to my church. I'm glad to have you and your wife, and a few others. You brought...
Trying to.
Yeah, you brought some with you. And if you're not going to church, or if you live out, you can't get to church, we stream our services at 10:30 on Sunday. And we'll be doing this podcast live next week. We tried it this week. Just for those of you who got on, our apologies. We're going to have to record this one, but our computer crashed, right? Almost at the end. It did something to our video, so it didn't work. So here we are. We're going to do this. Yeah, this will be take two. And so we'll try to keep this short and sweet to the point. But hey, we had a dry run. At least we know what we're going to do. Yeah, we're going to know what we're talking about at least this time. So behind the camera, I should mention this, behind the cameras and over there crashing my computer is Todd James. Don't feel bad. It was the computer. You know that. But we appreciate him coming and working the computers and the cameras for us and the switchers and making us look good, I hope.
Yeah.
My wife says take a little off the top. She says it's time for a haircut. Make me look good.
I got you.
All right. But thank you, Todd. And so we welcome you to this week's, do we call it an edition? I have a number. Yeah, edition. This week's topic, interesting topic, came across this, sent you the email so you can read about it.
Yep.
Is something that I got from Dr. Brown, who he has a syndicate, a radio show, Line of Fire, and he deals with all the topics. He's a minister as well, and does a great job. But he brought to us, something that he's been saying this is going to take place, pushback. And it is where a group of lawyers, I think I'm going to let you take this, but a group of lawyers who are calling us to action. So, you read a little bit about this. The group of lawyers are from, you're going to college, so this is a big deal to
I
you,
know,
right?
Yeah. Well, they're very, these lawyers are representing, universities in the country, and they're not small universities, like low-level universities by any means. They're, you look at their Princeton, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Kansas State, there's even Oxford's in there. So these are very influential, lawyers in the country. I guess they're professors. They're
head of their departments,
law professors. So, and this is and you alluded to that earlier, but a non-religious movement.
Yeah.
This is just a call to action against law. Like they feel as if the Supreme Court cannot set a countrywide law on supporting gay marriages, that it should be determined to the state by state on how they address homosexual marriages and things of that nature. So it is really interesting, like you said, people of the secular world coming together and kind of pushing for just not really anti, but just more of an awareness of our laws and what's going on with the homosexual movement.
You don't read it as anti? I almost do. They're saying we cannot let a panel of 6 individuals determine for us, and that their call of action is actually saying, look, states, step up to the plate,
Is it anti-homosexual or
No, it's not anti-homosexual, but rather the Supreme Court has made the law for the land, and where they're coming from. If I read this right, and I'm going to share with our viewers in just a moment, kind of who they cite. They cite what President Abraham Lincoln said, and that kind of thing. But as I interpret this, and I know you read it, so we're probably going to read from perspectives. But as I interpret what they're trying to do is they're actually trying to get the states to step up and offices of the state and say, you know what, this is not law of the land. This is not in our interest. This removes from us as a state our freedom and our right to govern ourselves, which each state is supposed to be able to do, is govern themselves. And so these lawyers are stepping up and saying, hey, we have so overstepped some boundaries. And they are calling to action for the state offices to do that, all the state offices. Of course, we've seen that happen already in Kentucky. Where a state officer, she said, hey, this goes against my convictions, and she did it for religious reasons, not state reasons, but the states need to step up, and these lawyers are calling for action as well for the candidates that are running for president. And so let me just share. Here's the I'll just read this. This is actually from Dr. Brown, and here's what he said, that these scholars have also issued a fourfold call to the presidential candidates, urging them to do one of the four things. One, treat Obergefell not as the law of the land, but rather to once again quote Justice Alito as an abuse of judicial power. Okay. Number two, to refuse to recognize Obergefell as creating a binding rule controlling other cases or their own conduct as a precedent. In other words, this shouldn't be a precedent judicially. And number three, appoint judges and justices who respect the constitutional limits of their power. They see this as a huge overstepping of judicial power that never was meant to be. And number four, support the First Amendment Defense Act to protect the conscience and free speech rights of those who hold fast to the conjugal understanding of marriage as a union of husband and wife. And they are calling, the presidential candidates to, hey, look, make this a big deal, make this a part of
their campaign.
Yeah, of the campaign, and this is a huge overstepping. Then they quote. They cite some. I'll get this here in a second. They cite some other things that happened in Abraham Lincoln's day. Let me just share this. They note that Lincoln warned that for the people, this is quote unquote, by the way, that for the people and their elected leaders to treat unconstitutional decisions of the Supreme Court as creating a binding rule on anyone other than the parties to the particular case would be for the people to have ceased to be their own rulers, having to that extent practically resigned their government into the hands of that eminent tribunal. And what took place in Abraham Lincoln's time is, of course, this was an issue of slavery, and he was emancipating the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing slavery, and that all men are created equal, and they needed to be freed, and that was part of it. And it went to the Supreme Court. A case went to the Supreme Court and said, "Hey, look, slavery is the law of the land." And he was calling people at that time to say, "No, this cannot be that." And so they cite him, and he had called people to do basically the same thing that these lawyers are doing today. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty cool. So, having said that, some of your thoughts,
kind of going back to the same thing, it's just interesting to me. Like, it's just a hard fight to fight because, like I said earlier, like our country, our government today is so much different than, the country and the government that Abraham Lincoln faced at the time. And to me, it's just hard to try to wrap my mind around trying to, uprise or come together and to actually try to, change a law. That hasn't been done successfully in hundreds of years. Not a major law, not something of civil rights and things like that. I just think, it's just a lot of people don't know their rights as citizens, and a lot of people don't know their laws, and a lot of people, quite frankly, don't care. So, when it comes down to challenging, the government or challenging their federal authority, it's going to be, shaky as far as participation. You'll have a few people, you have lawyers and you have other intellectuals and probably religious leaders who would stand up and make a good fight, make a good push against something. But as far as, just the common man, the 99% of America, I don't think would be very much involved in trying to actually go out and do something as far as like changing these laws. And I just think it's interesting because, like, with Abraham Lincoln, he was dealing with slavery. Like, that was, not to take away from, our civil rights movements of today, but in my opinion, slavery was so much more influential and so much more, like, just a burden on the country than homosexual rights. You know what I mean? So it's hard to, like I said, it's just a lot of information. It's hard to wrap my mind around it. Like, I do think it's comforting that, like I said, there are, like, secular individuals that are coming out and kind of just, kind of attacking the law side of things and saying, this isn't necessarily, good for us. Like, we're letting our government do things that aren't necessarily legal, aren't necessarily, things they should be doing. But, like I said, it's just a hard fight to fight, and I'll be interested to see, the follow-up on this as far as, in the next month or two or in the next year or two, how this proceeds and how this all kind of works out in the wash.
Am I kind of reading you? You feel like that this is way bigger than you, and so you're just kind of a pawn?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like, it is way bigger than you, like, way bigger than all of us. It's something that, it's a matter of the country. So one individual, it took, I think there are, 10, 15 different colleges on there, 10, 15 different law professors that got together. And, that's the first legitimate, document that has come across my desk as far as, an anti-law, an anti-Supreme Court ruling on, a current issue.
So you don't think there's a danger of us getting into another civil war?
No, no, definitely not. Because I don't think people of this country are as vindicated as they once were. Like I said, I don't think people have the passion for, and especially not for, homosexual rights. Like, I feel like the closest we ever were to something like that would have been like the 9/11 days. But that was, you saw we didn't revolt. We actually came together as a country and supported our government and supported the war and things like that. But no, it would take something much bigger than this for a civil war situation.
You don't think people are passionate about it? You don't think we're as impassioned? It's
hard to say.
Yeah, okay.
Because I look at it like, in the early American days, every farmer, wife and child were bearing arms and going out and fighting for their country. Yeah. And today, can you say with confidence that same thing would happen? If it literally were like a call to arms, if it were like a national call to arms, we are being invaded, how many people are really going to go out and fight for their country?
Not dealing with the homosexual issue in the church, which is an impassioned subject, of course, and of course, folks on both on both sides, and then there's those in the middle who I think, like you say, don't care and see it as progressive. Well, that's just progressive. I would call it liberal, not necessarily progressive, but. Abraham Lincoln, it was a big deal. It was a big deal, that, he was his Gettysburg Address. A government for the people, by the people, and of the people. I got that out of order, but I should have paid attention in school a little better. But, we're slowly passing that, that baton over, giving that up. The states did vote on all these things, and then the Supreme Court come in and
Overrule.
said, "Yeah, you're overruled. Out." And so, and it was, but I think led, all this come into play by these groups and organizations that were impassionate, that were for this pro same-sex marriage kind of thing, which troubled me because I thought, surely there's a way that we can. Allow the church to be the church and have the definition of marriage, which God is, from my standpoint, God is the one who actually defined marriage from the onset. And this country adopted that, and most civilizations have adopted the Judeo-Christian, view of marriage, and adopted it. And so it's kind of interesting, but now we've changed it and that kind of thing. But this subject isn't really about, the homosexual. This subject is about is it still a is the government the will of the people? The will of the people, and where that puts us.
I mean, I think not. I think just by the overrulings. Like, I think if the federal government ever has to like overrule a state ruling, then that means that obviously that's not in direct reflection of the people's wants or needs. You know, like you said, there were several states that voted no, that voted against, you know, homosexual marriage in their state. And like you said, the federal government, Supreme Court came in, made a ruling, and made it required for every state to honor that. And I just think it's interesting, like there's other laws out there, other, you know, civil rights movements coming through our country right now where they are being treated at the state level. You know, there are states legalizing things that other states aren't, and there are states taking stands against things others aren't. You know, and it's just interesting to me. I don't understand why homosexuality is not being treated the same way. Like, I'm wondering if I'm missing a link as to why it got to the Supreme Court, like why it didn't just stay at the state level. And you know, what's the deal, really? You know, in my opinion, like how is this happening? And you know, for me, not to get back to like the religious aspect of it, but homosexuality is like a minority. You know, like you're not like, you know, it's such a small faction of the United States that it's just interesting to me that once again the federal government felt as if they had to come in and pursue some kind of civil liberty for like this group of people. And I just don't, like I said, I don't understand how it got so out of control. I don't understand how that control got taken away from, you know, the state.
Yeah, I would argue that what happened in Abraham Lincoln's day, you know, when we're you know, freeing slaves, that you know, all men, it was a constitutional issue that, and as I do study history, even, you know, the founding fathers of the Constitution realized that was a hot button then and should have been dealt with then, but they didn't feel like they could pass everything at once. They figured, they actually believed, if I understand, if my study is right, they actually believed that the slaves would be free a lot sooner than they actually were. That it would actually come into play, because even then, as we were as a young country and as a new country, you know, we knew it was an issue. We knew then it wasn't right, you know. But that's not, you know, homosexuality is not the same. It doesn't even come to close in the scheme of things. So, you know, you're right. It's interesting. How did we get here? How did we get here? But we're here, that's for sure. And what these lawyers are saying, they're nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with religion. And they're saying, hey, look, the states have been denied their right to, you know, and the people, more importantly, the people, which should impassion us, you know, hey, it's not, you know, this government of the people, for the people, by the people is not happening here. Want to know why, you know? Exactly. Write your congressman, call your congressman, you know, and your representative, and say, hey, what's going on here? Why is this? That's the issue. Well, let's turn this towards the church.
Okay.
You are, and I shared this earlier, so I'm going to repeat it. You know, I love what you bring because you're a new, when I say a young believer, you've come to Christ within the past, if I understand right, a year?
Yeah, if
roughly?
that even. So.
Okay. So you're looking at Christianity with fresh eyes. What I love about you and your wife, Rachel, what I love about both of you is that you have all these questions. I mean, and you are right to question everything. You know, and I'm certainly not, I don't see that as a lack of faith. I did some of the same things as I became a believer in Jesus Christ. But you question Christianity. You don't just because I get up and preach, you know, you don't necessarily say, oh, well, no, wait a minute. You'll stop and say, well, wait a minute. Tell me a little more about this. I need to understand more. You know, why do we think this? Why do we believe this? Why do we feel that, you know, these ways? And why do we, you know, and so you approach things. And I appreciate that about you. That's one of the reasons why I asked you to be on this podcast, is so that you could bring that. It's actually refreshing, and it brings a perspective. And it brings a young perspective. One of the things the church hasn't done really well, and that is kept up with the younger generation. We're missing that generation. Really, we are. And we realize that, at least I certainly do, and know that we have to do some things and wake up to that, you know, because you know, in all reality, your age bracket pretty much absent from the church.
Yeah.
Truthfully. Yeah. I mean, in the larger scheme of things of the church, pretty much absent, at least in America. I don't know how it is in other countries, but in America, that's how it is, that there's the young church. But you give me hope, and there's hope for the church, and most of the young people that have been coming to our church bring that with them. So your spin on this thing, just kind of give me a perspective on this whole thing. What do you think we ought to do as a church, as a young person?
As a church, I think the best thing you can do at this point, until anything legally becomes overturned or legally becomes, overwritten or trumped, I think that you guys, like the church as a whole, just needs to stand tall on their beliefs and on their, their morals and ethics on certain situations. I do not feel as if, I guess bullied is kind of a bad term, but I don't know if you guys should be bullied by, state or national, federal law as far as when it steps foot on your beliefs. I look at the church as if it's older than our country. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the beliefs and the laws and the rights that you have within your sanctuary should be upheld to the highest standard. You know what I mean? Like that's, and I don't feel as if, I look at churches, and growing up in a secular world, in a secular environment, I always looked at churches like they were almost untouchable. You can't touch a church as far as what they do within those walls. That is their constitutional right to perform or act or just do anything, within their walls that promotes their religious beliefs and their religious freedom. So, I know it's gotten really, hectic in the past few months, 6 months to a year, as far as, this gay marriage thing and how the church has responded to it. A lot of churches are now not performing marriages. They're not, publicly putting themselves out there as far as, because they don't want to get caught in a situation of having to deny a gay couple and get caught up in the whirlwind of lawsuit and things like that.
Do you think we've handled it? I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No, you're good.
Do you think we, as a church, we've handled it well?
I mean, I think as a church, I haven't heard any bad publicity.
Okay.
But I haven't heard any good either. I think the church is just kind of silent right now, and maybe that is the best thing you can do. On your local level, every church falls in line and just kind of is focused on making sure that they're
you come here, I'm not silent.
Well,
so.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But making sure that your followers and that your building and that your sanctuary is still maintaining the same flow it was before all of this. But I think as coming together and releasing a statement of sorts or releasing some kind of idea, the church has been pretty silent as far as that goes. And I'm curious as to when, because like I said, growing up, I looked at the church as very powerful and very untouchable, and it seems as if not only is the state losing power, the church is losing power as well. And so, we're a call to action to the state government and things like that. But I think there needs to be a call to action to just the church as a whole.
What I think I hear you saying to me is that congregants want to hear from their pastors.
Yeah.
Pastors speak on these issues.
Publicly.
Yeah, take stands on
these
issues.
On the news, CNN, MSNBC.
Well, now see, that's problematic for us. Every time, actually,
I understand that, but that's where you have to make yourself present.
Every time I get an interview, I'm always concerned with what spin will be put on it.
Yeah.
I didn't say that at all, and that kind of thing. Actually, I've been pretty lucky, pretty fortunate when I do speak. And those kind of things, and our sphere of influence. Then we need to use it. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, it needs to get bigger and used a lot more.
And how do we do that without bullying people on the coming at it? We've been bullied, recently, but how do we do that without bullying people? I've shared with my congregation what I think but I think it's a fair question. How does the church in general? We don't want to just lob bombs over at people and destroy people. Everybody's made in the image of God. And we need to respect people.
Hate the sin, not the sinner.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I don't know that we're going to get any answers for all these issues tonight, but it certainly is fun to discuss this. A couple things. Before I close, at the end, I'll talk about where we might go maybe next week or the week after.
Okay.
And I'll bring Todd in on this discussion after we end this. But I probably should wrap this thing up. Just a couple verses, how we grapple with this for tonight. To couple verses that come to mind with all this. I preached a message, I think, about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I know you were here because I mentioned you. Dealing with, do we civil disobedience? Do we dare do it? Does God ever bless that kind of thing? And I went to an issue of the Old Testament, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and talked about that. And what they said to the King Nebuchadnezzar, just to remind folks and remind believers, there are times, I think, when we need to be civil disobedient. Orange Scott certainly did it with slavery. One of the things that's, you guys don't know this, but one of the things about the Wesleyan church is that Orange Scott, a Methodist pastor, part of the Underground Railroad,
Okay.
the churches. We actually have a church in New York where we hid slaves, kind of thing. So that was a big proponent from the Wesleyan church. So there's civil disobedience again. Doing what we think is right. Here's what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, and Daniel said, King Nebuchadnezzar, you know what? Even if God doesn't save us from your fire, what he was going to put them under, we will not bow to your gods. That was civil disobedience, and God blessed them. He met them there in the fire, and he blessed them. And obviously, there are times when God says, you know what, my people need to stand. And so I just want to say that. And another thing that what was said in Isaiah, there are some people out there that don't want to hear the truth. And we can't help that. In fact, Isaiah records that they told him, don't tell us truth, tell us what we want to hear. So a lot of times, people just want to hear. And I often worry about that, what my people take away. My job is to get into the Word and then just share what God has to say from the Word. That's my job. I don't get to really... I try to make it interesting. I try to make it interesting even today. But my job is to say, thus saith the Lord. I didn't write these rules. I didn't give the 10 Commandments. God did. We just get to repeat them from time to time and remind people. And then James said, and just for what it's worth, James said that if anyone knows the good they ought to do and to not do it, it's actually considered sin. So when we need to step up and to help, if we do things that are geared to help people, whether it be telling truth, this is what God says, that kind of thing, we need to do it. Otherwise, it would be sin. So I share that with you in perspective with all this. I don't know that we need to start a civil war over this. But I think we'll know, and the Spirit will teach us. We'll know, if we need to be civilly disobedient or get up and get in the media and say, hey, I disagree with that,
So
count me among that number, but for the people's sake so that they know truth and what God says. Let's talk a little bit. I'm hoping to talk about a discussion, maybe a panel. And Todd, if we can if you have some friends, where I would like black and white, and talk about racism, in the church and how it does. So to our viewers, maybe not next week. I think this is going to require us to do a lot more prep work, and maybe have a panel of 4 or 5, more than just you and I talking about this stuff. But just address it, kind of thing. The church needs to be transparent about some of those issues. And what does it take? And is it cultural? Those are the questions that are coming. Anyhow, just want to share that with our listeners that I hope to do that with you guys. I think it would be a lot of fun. I think we can behave ourselves. I would hope so. And do that. So I hope that would come. Let me put in plug in closing for the church. We're located in Rochester, Minnesota. Sundays 10:30. The congregation is really an awesome group of people, the real deal. Not that any other congregation isn't, just I'm very proud of them. And invite you to come. You want to put plug in for the school you go to?
I would have to. First things first, like I said, I'm definitely interested in seeing how this pans out over the next few weeks or the few months. So let me know, keep me updated if you see anything about this.
Keep you in the loop, sure.
For the viewers, you definitely don't want to miss that panel discussion. I think that may possibly one of be our best shows to date. Just a very interesting topic, very, hard-nosed topic. So definitely tune in for that. We'll keep you updated. And for 3, also here in Rochester, Minnesota is a great small college called Crossroads College. We offer men and women's athletics, and I kind of said last week we have a dual degree program, so you will receive a ministry degree as well as a sports science or a music composition, any kind of psychology, counseling, anything like that. So, if interested, let us know. And hopefully we can talk about it when you come to Oak Hills.
Yep. Light for the Journey, where we do look at life, the real stuff of life, and from a perspective what God would have us do, how to walk this journey. God bless you.